Hi folks, you're all very welcome to the third and final discussion as part of our Machnamh Bród series. So Machnamh is an old Irish concept that encompasses meditation, reflection, contemplation and thought. So this series was very much aimed at not focusing on those outside of our community, but essentially I suppose holding a mirror up to ourselves and facing some uncomfortable truths and seeing how we can do better. The first discussion on Wednesday evening focused on the experience of two speakers and our host, who were born outside of Ireland but decided to call it their home. One of them is here tonight with us, as well as the experience of a trans woman who was born here, but how life has changed since embracing her identity and living her truth. It was a very refreshing discussion about how we can be more embracing of those who are bringing the vibrancy to our capital city and indeed our country. Our second discussion last night, Wednesday night, focused on issues such as ageism and ableism. It was a very rich and blunt and kind of like, I suppose, frustrated look at how the community can often be geared towards young, able-bodied and neurotypical people. From the lack of accessibility in many of our queer spaces to how we communicate. I think it highlighted that many of us may have blind spots when arranging events and what we need to do better to be as inclusive as possible when it comes to both older LGBTQI plus people in our community who may have a disability, seen or unseen. Tonight's discussion, which I think will be very, very interesting, will center around the topic of like sexual romantic discrimination. We'll hopefully have a rich discussion about the barriers people can face based, I suppose, on ignorance, fear and bias. I'm very privileged to have three amazing guests with me tonight. Firstly, I have Mcgrattan. That's the last time I'm going to use that name because I think we all better know as Veda, also known as, I suppose, the reason why I fell in love watching The Art of Drag as a teenager. My first time at the George, I think it was Spanish Train, Say Hello, Wave Goodbye, and rocked my world. Veda is not only a drag performer, is also an artist, a singer, a creative force to be reckoned with, a podcaster and an activist, whether she wants it or not. Secondly, we'll have Noah Halpin. Noah is a trans man from Dublin, of Ireland, TENI, and before that he was the founder of This Is Me, the transgender healthcare campaign. Dublin, and funny enough, an old college buddy of mine, or he was whenever he would get himself out of bed on time. And last but not least, we have Pradeep Mahadeshwar, who is a visual artist, an anti-racism activist and a Dublin Pride volunteer. Pradeep was born in Mumbai and currently lives in Dublin, and we're delighted to have him here as both, I suppose, a Dublin Pride volunteer who can help us to get to grips with tackling racism more, which is very important, and of course as part of our graphic design crew, helping to make everything we do that much more vibrant, inclusive and colourful. But I'll, I suppose, let them talk a bit more about themselves and how they kind of ended up talking about the issues that matter to them. So I suppose we'll start with you, if that's okay, Veda.
Yeah, bring it on. Hi, sweetie. I love your t-shirt. Very cool. Your boobs look amazing.
So yeah, Veda, I suppose like, you know, obviously you have been involved in kind of like not just performance, but I suppose community stuff for years. I know you did a lot of stuff, obviously, when I was in Belong To and kind of promoting causes. So what kind of like, I suppose, lit that fire under you?
I guess I started at the Alternative Miss Ireland. So that's my drag family and that's my drag background. And that was like a huge piece of activism for, you know, for a long time. And so I guess that part was always instilled in me. Also, the first club that I ever performed in San Francisco, first time ever, which we're going to call T-Shack, but it was called something different at the time, was hosted by Heglina, who was very big in the community in San Francisco. And she was HIV positive and very involved in raising funds and raising awareness for lots of things. So I guess that was what the moms, the drag moms, taught me right from the start.
That's brilliant. What about you, I suppose, Pradeep? A bit more about your background, I suppose.
Yeah, so I born and raised in India, Mumbai, and around 15 years back, I left India and I came to UK, London. I lived there. Then I lived in Prague for some time, and then I moved to Ireland for certain reasons for 6 months. But now I ended up here more than 8.5 years. So it's a long journey. It wasn't planned, decided. It was spontaneous, crazy. And then I came here with experience of gay life in India and in UK and these other parts of Europe. So when I came Ireland and Dublin, it just gave me that urgency to talk about my issues and people of color, queer people of color. And that all gave me more power. And I wasn't sure what will be the starting point to tell the story. And I'm a storyteller. And GCN gave me the really good platform to talk about these stories of Asian queer people in Ireland, meaning for first and second generation and newly economic migrants. So that's my journey, and throughout the journey, I met really amazing people, and I'm keep learning and keep evolving. I met Stevie, and through Stevie, I met whole Grace Bunch, and through Grace Bunch, I met Noah, Tony, Will. You can name it. All these amazing people who are amazing contributors and collaborators. So. Yeah, and I like to talk about racism, and I specifically love to talk about. If you call me anytime in the night, I can wake up and talk about sexual racism. Last 4 years, I'm reading and talking with people, talking with different activists from different part of globe, and I'm starting and keep evolving and gaining more knowledge about the subject.
Brilliant, thanks, Pradeep. And Noah, I suppose I was hanging around with you, I suppose, at the time where Noah really became known in the world. So we were in Liberties College together. I can't remember what year, a few years back. You were a foil in some of the teachers' heads at the time, very headstrong, and that hasn't changed much. But I suppose tell us a bit more about your journey, I suppose, from kind of that sense of discovery to now working for the national organisation for trans people in Ireland.
Yeah, so thanks for telling everyone how bold I was at school. I'm sure everyone knows anyway. I guess I kind of steal a phrase from Panty Bliss when I say that I think I'm a bit of an accidental activist. I mean, it kind of started in those years at Liberty College when I did come out as trans. And, you know, when I came out as trans and then tried to access healthcare, you know, I discovered that it was almost near impossible. And then I discovered that it wasn't just near impossible for me. It was near impossible for every other trans person who wanted to avail of gender affirming healthcare in Ireland. And, you know, I think my activism and my journey was kind of born from anger and this sense of, you know, we deserve just as much as everybody else does. You know, we're not asking for anything special. We're just asking to be equal. And so, you know, I think it was one night when I got told that my referral letter to start HRT with the gender service in Ireland was lost for the third time. I got really angry. I had a bit of a cry. And then I did what any angry trans man would do, and I drank 2 bottles of wine and set up a Facebook event for a protest, because that's all I knew how to do. But I had never organized a protest in my life. But you know what? from that very moment, you know, from the very first protest that we organized, you know, I turned the corner that day thinking 10 or 15 of my friends would turn up to shout at the gates of Leinster House with me. And I turned the corner onto the street, and there was about 300 to 400 people there. And it took off from there. And what I kind of came to realize is that, you know, this is affecting too many people, and people are afraid to speak up and speak out. So this cannot be just a singular protest. This has to be a campaign. This has to continue until all trans people are afforded safe, accessible, best practice, person-centered healthcare in Ireland. So that's where kind of my grassroots activism was born. And, you know, I do also quite a lot of activism in the realm of HIV and sexual health. So, you know, it was kind of born from grassroots movements, you know, and then after doing a number of years with the This Is Me transgender healthcare campaign, and, you know, working on things like being the department or the Minister for Health representative on the trans healthcare steering committee and things like that, did I decide to go for this position in TENI, this new position that was created, you know, solely to focus on the community and to engage with the community and help the community when it comes to their own healthcare or their own mental health. So, you know, I'm hoping to be able to make a difference in this new role. I'm not doing anything different. I'm just changing the way I work. But I am, you know, still absolutely 100% committed to safe, accessible, best practice, person-centered healthcare for all trans and non-binary people in this country. And I will always be completely committed to fixing that until there's nothing left to fix, which will never happen. There will always be something left to do.
I don't know. You might do it all. I wouldn't be surprised.
No, there's a lot of people working on it. It's not just me.
Great.
I would second that, Noah, in fairness, because I remember at the time when you start speaking out, even some trans people that you and I both know felt that maybe you were rocking the boat too much or asking for too much. And then you went and you did it, and all of a sudden you had a seat at the table, and kind of like, you know, doors opened that weren't there initially. So fair play. Well, thanks, folks, for those introductions. So I'm going to turn back to you, Veda, I suppose. Once again, a queen of many hats, but your recent project, I suppose, is the Pause Vibes podcast, with, of course, Robbie Lawler, who many of us know and love, and an array of guests. And I have to say, the bits I've heard so far, you know, it's funny, it's emotive, it's uplifting, hilarious. It can also be like deeply touching. I'm not usually a big crier, but I've shed a tear or two, both happy and sad. So I suppose, how did that come about?
Well, I've shed many tears and had so much fun and so many laughs, to be honest. It's been an amazing experience, and I'm just so happy that we're doing it. And how it came about basically was, at the end of 2019, I came out very publicly in a very grandiose manner about my HIV status by releasing a record, an EP, called I Came Out One Night. And that connected me to a lot more HIV positive people and their stories. But I was hearing those stories really in nightclubs and pubs and smoking areas. And of course, we all know that coronavirus came along and shut all of that down, as well as all of my plans for the record and whatever live shows I was going to do. So I started doing stuff online, like everybody, like we are now, and really enjoyed that for a while and found it amazing to be able to connect quite deeply with people that way, doing drag and entertaining them. And that sort of lingered with me for a while I was trying to figure out how to keep doing my HIV activism, and specifically dealing with stigma, because the whole point of the record and the music video and doing it that way was to attack the stigma, address the stigma, or really draw it out, really. But over the course of the year that we've all been essentially alone and separate from our queer family, I've been really thinking about what I want to be different when I go back into the real world. And one of the things I wanted to do was to create a space where people who aren't out of the closet can start to understand the experience of coming out of the closet and how empowering that can be. And not really to compel them to do that, but really just to provide that positive vibe, literally that positive vibe that, you know, that there's life after trauma. And that's what gave birth to the idea of the podcast. And then within all of that, funnily enough, I was making this documentary movie called How to Tell a Secret with Robbie Lawler. It's been written and it's being directed by Sean and Anna, and it's based on a play called Rapids that was written by Sean about Robbie's experience becoming HIV positive at 21. And that's becoming this documentary movie. This is a very long-winded answer, but it's the truth. So I started filming that, and my first day filming, I was filming with Robbie, and I thought he is the perfect person to do this podcast with. And over the course of this film, I'm going to ask him to do it with me. But instead, what happened was a few days later, he went on the Tommy Tiernan show and just killed it. It was just like amazing. And I messaged him the next morning to tell him how great he was. And he messaged me straight back. And I thought, this is the time, like, just hit him with it, because, you know, he's on the rise. Get him while you can. So that's what I did. I pitched it to him, and the rest, I guess, is history, and has surpassed my expectations, because I didn't know at the time that Robbie and I would have such great chemistry and have such a good time together. And I didn't know that we would have support and sponsorship from Pride. I didn't really know we'd have an amazing designer like Lavender, or our producer Esther, who is our secret weapon. I really had nothing but an idea. And this was only a few weeks ago. So it's incredible that we've come this far this quickly. And I'm so grateful for the support.
Brilliant. And I suppose to follow on from that, so many people, obviously, you mentioned the year we've had. I suppose many people have drawn parallels, I suppose, between the AIDS pandemic of the 80s and I suppose the current pandemic we're in. And obviously earlier this year, the TV show It's a Sin became a huge success. So that series touched on so many issues, including obviously sexual discrimination against HIV positive people. Like, is that something you have experienced personally or know of, for example, with when it comes to sex or dating?
Oh yeah, of course. There's so much of it out there, and you see so much of it, whether you experience it firsthand or not, because we all know how the apps work and the dating apps work. We were talking to Bruce Richmond the other day, who's the creator of the U=U movement, about what started that fire in him to create the movement. And he described a trifecta of really horrific dates where these three guys in a row that he had developed like crushes on or feelings for had basically rejected him because of his HIV status. And I think that it's becoming less common. I like to think it's becoming less common. I feel like the U=U message is getting out there, and that younger people believe in science more than older people, hopefully, for the most part. So it is something that's changing, but it's still something that's very alive in our society. And it's definitely one of the big areas of stigma that we need to deal with, that HIV positive people are dealing with all the time, really.
Veda, do you want to tell us what U=U means? For anyone
sure.
watching?
It means undetectable equals untransmittable. And undetectable means that if you're on effective medication, then your viral load is undetectable, which means if they scanned your whole body, they couldn't find it anywhere. And untransmittable means that you can't give it to anyone else. It's 100% impossible for you to give it to anybody else. So it means that even if you're having sex without condoms, you can't infect your partner. So it's a total game changer. And it's a message that's been very slow to get out there, because even within the queer community and within the positive community, we put up resistance to it because of stigma and shame, really. And also just because of the legacy of the AIDS pandemic and how that looked and how we all experienced that, or even how we just experienced the aftermath, you know? So it's great news. Like, we're in a golden age of HIV medicine. It's like brilliant news, but the challenge is to get the news out there, and also to deal with all of the people who are still suffering from stigma or feeling traumatized and feeling like they can't share their secret or lean on their friends or their family. And we need to change that by talking to the families as well, by talking to the community as much as we can, and just getting people's stories out there.
Which I think is what's so beautiful actually about Pause Vibes, because so often when the media portrays HIV, it's very much doom and gloom and suffering and loneliness and isolation. And it's wonderful to hear people full of laughter, full of joy, you know, having chats and living full lives.
And thirst traps is what we're all about as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like I say it all the time, thirst traps. Like hot pause guys, you know, get that good pause dick, girls. Like U equals U is a thing, but I like to say D equals D at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So that's the message. And, you know, a lot of the guys, in fact, everyone that I'm meeting is beautiful in so many ways and hot. So that's something that I like to use in our marketing, basically, you know, is to point out that there's all of these amazing people out there that you could date if you just opened up your mind instead of your ass for a change. And, you know, there's a feeling about people who are HIV positive that they're not the kind of people that you take home to meet your mother. So, like, some of these guys, like, live on the Aran Islands in Aran sweaters and have flowing red hair. Like, my mother would die to meet someone who looked like that. You know what I mean? So, we're just about using sledgehammers on stigma and just trying to change the story, really.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It really is. And I suppose,
Thank you.
Pradeep, obviously HIV status is not the only basis for sexual discrimination, as we know. And you've been very open, I suppose, about your struggles with kind of sexual or romantic discrimination within the community, I suppose, here as an Asian man. So could you tell us, I suppose, a little more about your history with sexual discrimination within the LGBTQI plus community here in Ireland?
Yeah, so I was just listening everything what Veda was saying, and I was also listening this my favorite YouTube video where panties will call. So all these discourses are so important and so touching. It just moved you from inside when I was just listening now what Veda was saying. You just do one thing, step back and just put racism or person of color in that section of HIV positive or gay in Ireland. Like, you will get the same vibe. It is the same impact. And through this pandemic time, people of color who are mainly immigrant people of color. The time was then, this whole year, these 365 days, it was such a devastating time. And when it comes, and then we need to talk about intersectionality. We often put all immigrants or queer people of color in one box, but you need to just go deep dive into it a little bit and see what it. One brown person from India, the gay person of India, he has distinct experiences from brown person from Brazil or you can say South America. So there is a whole lot of things those are related to, and you can put stigma is there, but also I would like to talk more about shame. There is large scale shame in here with how Caucasian white people look at, or like gay men look at brown Asian people. There is shame. There is something unattractive, undesirable related to them. It is not attractive. You can't see any Asian boyfriends here in Dublin. So I lived in country like I lived in UK. It is often there you can see. It is more multicultural, but you can see there Asian people can be considered as hookups. They can be considered as dates. they can be considered as friendships. Most important, friendship. For me, it took 8 years, like 8 times 365 days to build up friendships. Luckily, I was lucky that I met Stevie, and he changed my world because of him. He introduced me so many amazing people. Not all Asian men in Ireland, they are as lucky as me. And when I started writing for TCN, I started researching and talking people. I talk more than 200 people, and these are like wide range of people. That they are from like first generation, second generation, or newly immigrated people. It is hard in life, and you can't even imagine the depth of loneliness, the depth of lack of belonging, and most importantly, no friendship. It's so hard to make friendship. If you go to any pub, if you go to George, if you give one brown person who can go alone in Panty or George to have drink, he will go alone and he will come alone. Nobody will talk with him. People will see through him. But I have 20 or more examples here, and from heard these real stories of people. If the brown person go with one white person or some South American person, there are chances they will engage to certain kind of discussion, and that could lead to more chats or maybe hook up or date or whatever, or just dance or tell drinks. But you can't go alone and have fun. It is hard, right? And then we talk about mental health, and then it comes to sexual health. I think it is on this every front. It is hard, and with this the pandemic time, it has become more harsh and more like I'm talking with people because I have this small group of support group. So I lived here more. I have a lot of experience of this, so I keep in touch with people and talk with them. So there are Asian men who are HIV positive. There have Asian men, they have came here with really hard background in India, but now because of loneliness here, they have to they become in drugs and substance abuse because those loneliness, depression that drive them so crazy. So these are all things that need to be considered, and that give power to writing about it. And then I started my Instagram profile called Queer Myth, where I create this illustration of how brown or people of color engaging with people with white people, just straightforward, and that creates noise. But again, it becomes back to me that so that my profile is anonymous. It could be anyone. But when I discover I'm Asian, people started following me. So there is something unattractiveness related to this Asianness. 3 years back, 2 years back, I did this. I took a part in research for this Australian researcher, and that person was, because it's a copyright, I can't discuss the name of that project, but that person gave me a volunteer. I was a volunteer, and I took as a fake profile as a white, just average looking Caucasian white man on Grindr. So I was catfishing, and then I also catfish as average looking South American man. And I was, after that experience, I was 2 months I was in depression because I'm on Grindr months after months, years after year. Not the really few people tap or chat, and the chat doesn't go beyond hi, hello. But as soon as I went as a white person, so many people, they wanted to have my come in pet them, or they want to suck my dick, or bareback, or anything. And the same thing with as a brown Latino man, and that gave me so much depression, and that gave me power to talk about this. No, this need to be tell. I can't change it. I know I can't change it overnight, and I can't change it alone overnight. But I can actually tell the story. These things are happening, and I come from artist background. I'm not new to this thing. I'm educated. When people treat me like, oh, he's from Asian, so he didn't know anything. I had my show in London where Victoria Beckham came to my show. So I don't go to the rooftop and talk all this glamorous thing, but just because I'm brown or Asian.
She's actually here right now. She's having a cigarette in my back garden. So don't get competitive with me about the Spice Girl.
No. So my point is that. So my point is that when you are brown person Asian, people just filter everything out of it. How good you are, or how attractive you are, or what can you offer as a friend or collaborator, or as a date, or as a hookup. It doesn't mean that I'm brown, so I have small dick, or I can't do good sex, or I can't kiss well. So these are really horrifying things. And
yeah, I think we all can relate to that, like being treated like that way, especially through the medium of something like Grindr, which is just horrific anyway. But as a very femme presenting person, like, you know, Grindr was never my playground because I just was never be a hit on Grindr. And as a HIV positive person, I was so horrified by Grindr already without ever thinking about going on there and disclosing my status or getting involved that way. And I'm not judging anyone who's using the app, and I hope that they meet fab people and have great times. I had some fun times and I met some great people through the apps, but the apps themselves, they just don't embrace diversity at all. And it's a real shame. Do you use any of the apps, Noah?
Yeah, I did. Now, I'm actually currently recently have a partner, so but I would have up until quite recently, from the very beginning of my transition, I kind of put myself out there really quickly, and you know, I guess my experience is not very similar to the experience of a lot of trans people that I would hear. So, you know, I think my handle on Grindr is literally Trans Guy Dublin. You know, like, I'm one of these people that I will immediately say it. You know, I want people to know that before we start talking. But you know, that's not the same for a lot of trans people. And what I would say is that trans people don't owe you that information, you know, immediately. Trans people don't, you know, aren't obliged to tell you that they are trans, unless, of course, it is relevant and you are on the way to their house or whatever. It's not, you know, but I was one of those people who, you know, would say in my profile that I am trans, because then it gives other people a decision as to whether they want to message me or not. And then there's nothing awkward. But like I said, trans people don't owe that. However, the flip side of, you know, making people aware from the get-go is that it attracts a cohort of people who are, you know, people within our own community who are themselves transphobic. So out of the blue, I might get messages that would be like, hey, what's a bird doing on Grindr? Or, you know, stuff like, here, you're a woman, like, get off this, and stuff like that, even without me messaging first. They just random people.
I got a lot of the same stuff, you know, because people recognize me from being a drag queen, so that, you know, they would like bring that into it. Or, you know, and anyone who's non-binary or trans, I think experiences a lot of that. And then on the flip side, an awful lot of trans attracted people are very intense, but very shady.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. Like, I'm not saying it's all dreadful. I have had some amazing hookups with some amazing, beautiful people on Grindr. You know, I was never starved of it. So, you know, it does prove that there are good and lovely and accepting people out there. However, there are that, you know, bunch that might like us a bit too much, you know, where you become completely fetishized by them, you know. And most trans people on these apps will tell you that we can kind of almost pick those people out from the word go, depending on the language they use to introduce themselves and things like that. You know, I don't mind if someone finds the fact that I am trans or part of my identity attractive. That doesn't actually bother me. But when you're being fetishized in a derogatory way, that is where it becomes a problem. And also things like, you know, these unsolicited questions that you would never ever ask anybody in any other circumstance. You know, you'd get a message, and before someone even says hello, it would be show me your pussy. You know, sorry, I hope there's no kids listening. You know, things like that, just immediately first message, and you're like,
I was actually
you
going.
like, you don't even know what my genitals are. You know, things like asking about your genitals and things like that, and you don't even know if a trans man has a vagina. You don't even know if they use their vagina for sex. You know, so, or they could use both, you know. So we do end up getting an awful lot of those kind of messages, where, you know, in normal circumstances you never text someone or message someone asking the kinds of messages that I got. I think I kind of deal with it in humor sometimes, depending on the severity of it. But I got one not long ago that said, they opened conversation with, so have you had the full extension yet? Question mark. And I sent them back, you know, a picture I pulled from Google of someone building an extension onto the house, and I just said not finished yet, you know, something like that, you know. But not everybody can take things in their stride like that. You know, there are people who you know, will be severely affected by comments like that or questions like that. And that's why, you know, I have to constantly remember that, you know, there are people that are a lot more vulnerable than me, people who are more affected by these things than I am. And I think everyone has to keep that in mind, not just for trans people, but, you know, any form of discrimination. You know, a lot of my friends are living with HIV. Very few of them have it stated on their status, because of stated on their status, stated on their profiles, because they found that when they were treated an awful lot more different on Grindr. So, you know, it is that stigma that causes that shame, that makes people, you know, hide these kind of parts of our identities. You know, I would consider being trans a huge part of myself. So yeah, there are just different things like that when it comes to apps that can make it a little bit more difficult for trans people to navigate.
I was actually going to ask all of you that, because so often people, when they think of sexual discrimination, do think of rejection, when actually fetishism can sometimes be just as insulting. And people sometimes, especially with trans people, online and off, feel they have an automatic right to ask them about their body and kind of like, you know, their like genitalia and all that kind of stuff. And
but the other thing about that, Jamie, is there's an assumption that, you know, if you are trans, if you're a bottom, if you're even just a femme gay, that there's this assumption that you are passive, that you are going to be submissive and passive and things like that, when that might not be the case at all. I mean, I love a bit of downplay here and there, do you know what I mean? But the assumption that someone can message you in a dominating way or in an aggressive way, and that you will take that because you're
I was going to say that
trans,
too. Yeah, exactly.
And that is a very real problem.
There's an assumption that they're in control. That's what I would find, especially like if I would date people in drag, or men that would come to the club looking for me, which would happen a lot in the early days. And always they thought they were in control. And I would let them think they were in control, because that was just part of this fantasy that we were constructing together or something. But it is this weird assumption when really they're big babies at the end of the day. You know?
And can I say, actually, it is interesting that it is interesting that you can hide a lot of things, or you can take a decision how much you can reveal yourself. But I can't hide my skin color. It is out in there. So when it comes to that point, every possibility it gets stopped, it ends. And there was one discussion just now. Veda was talking about why Grinder. So where I can go, because if on normal broad day before like pre-COVID scenario, I just found only one place as a people of color comfortable, that was Grace. Otherwise, all other gay places, it is unwelcome. And I would like to talk this term, and people get afraid and they just scrutinize me a lot. But it is Asian gay men are untouchables. If you go to, if I tell my story, and not only my another 10 Asian men story about the boiler house, you will get the clarity, like how much the stigma or shame being associated, because Asian people have small dicks, or Asian people, they are not good in kissing. Those all stereotypes. So if we go to any club, pub, we don't get any interaction. So how can we meet people? So that's how we end up to the Grinder. It's not our choice. I hate Grinder, but if I don't get Grinder, I can't see beautiful men, because no beautiful men like to see me. They just
I think
look me
lots
through.
of people feel very isolated socially on the scene, though, and I'm not diminishing at all what you're saying. I think you're 100% right in what you're saying. But I think that a lot of people feel very lonely and find it hard to connect with people in real life at a bar or in a club. And more, they're going to the apps to look for a connection. And the whole thing just seems to be like a snake that's eating its own tail. We need to break out of that. We need to be friendlier with each other, all of us.
Yeah.
And more inclusive, and socially more inclusive, and socially more aware, and try to introduce yourself to people and try to introduce people to other people. It's one of the things that I really hope we can learn as the gay spaces open up again, to just do better.
Yeah.
Every time I have a great
we need to really work on this, and what Veda just said is such a positive thing, that we need to do things, because it's not only about sex, it is also the intimacy, also friendships. That is need. If I come thousands miles away from my home and I choose my country or to work or study, I leave my friends and all my comfort zone behind. And when I come to this country, and I just denied my sexuality because I'm not attractive, or there is something attractiveness associated with my geographic origin. It is not a humble thing for community. And when people come from outside, community doesn't help. It is not welcoming at all. I'm trying to do this thing welcoming, to show people, to talk with them, or just whatever Stevie did with me, I'm doing the same, because just you said that we need to introduce the people. Stevie came and he introduced me to a lot of people, but it was like 7 years gap. Like when I arrived Ireland, it took 7 years to meet someone like Stevie, and I met Stevie on Grindr. So not like it was a rare event, but I agree what you're saying, that we need to be more humble to this situation and just think beyond just sex, and build up the intimate relationship and friendships, and help people to bring their belonging, and help them to be vulnerable, to talk with people. I have seen people, they don't talk much. Asian immigrants, they don't talk much because nobody talk with them. They live in shared house where they can not all immigrants are comfortable to be open with their housemates. So they seek the support from some gay friends, how to make gay friends or lesbian friends. Why can't we see Asian lesbians in Dublin? I saw Asian lesbians at Grace's anniversary party, and I hugged them and I asked them, "Oh, are you in Dublin?" Oh, and they say, "Yes, we live in Ireland for of 4 to 5 years, but we don't like to go to the gay places written because these are not welcoming for us." So this need to be upgraded. This need to be changed, and pandemic has given us the time to reflect what is going wrong and how we can fix it in small steps.
Yeah, I suppose like as we gear towards the end, that was actually leaning into my next question. Veda preempted it and started the nice conversation. So basically, because obviously this week is about reflection, we so often focus obviously on who's oppressing us from outside, not what's oppressing us within the community. So it's a question for all three of you. If we're taking a look at ourselves, I suppose, what do you think we as a community, our festivals, our events, our bars, our clubs, what can we do to be more inclusive of course, trans people, HIV positive people, people with disabilities that I mentioned, like all sorts of things, and obviously people who may not have been born in Ireland but are embracing it as their own. Like, how can we really create spaces where they feel comfortable, safe, and involved, because it's their community too?
Get them to create the spaces with us really is how it works. You know, I think especially if you're talking about like festivals and events and social things, it's really about involving everybody in the process, I think. Especially, you know, like you were talking earlier on, people who are considered to be living with a disability are not really catered to in our social spaces at all. So we need to talk to them about what they would like to see. And I know as a HIV positive person, as a member of the trans community, nothing turns me on more than seeing representation of creativity and art that comes from our community or is a gift from the wider community. But I think that that creativity and art and music and inclusion is really key to what should happen next.
I think I would have to absolutely agree with Veda. And, you know, one of the events that I first saw kind of a lot, like, well, two events actually, that I think we can almost model where we go forward with on is, you know, when we talk about, say, festivals, Love Sensation in 2019 was, and I'm one of these people who stop and look around and take in exactly what is different about this space than is about that. At Love Sensation, you got to choose which gendered security guard you went to in case there was no touching of people going in. There was, you know, I know for a fact that, you know, all the security staff were briefed in diversity before, you know, the event even took place. All the toilets were gender neutral. You know, there was non-alcoholic selection for people who can who can't or don't drink. The artists were so varied in you know, in ethnicity, in gender, in you know, there was artists with disabilities. My own friend who's a wheelchair user said that it was the most accessible festival that she had been to. And, you know, just little things like that. Most of the acts were women led as well. You know, and that's probably one of the most inclusive festivals that I have ever been to. There was important information and community information being given out. ACT UP were there talking to people about HIV and PrEP. So were sexual crisis, pregnancy and sexual health. From the HSE were there giving out, you know, free condoms and lube and talking to people about STIs and things like that. We had community groups that were doing talks and education sessions. We had our own queer artists, you know, based here in Ireland doing art installations. I think it was the first ever festival in the world to have a large U=U art installation there. So, and then when we look at places like club nights like Grace, who literally have signs all over the walls saying, we in this club, we do not stand for racism, transphobia, homophobia, who put stickers on our phone cameras when we go in so that everyone feels comfortable to express themselves in the way that they want to in a safe space. You know, I think that we need to be going more towards that way. And the only people who can do it is us ourselves. But like Veda said, include us. And I would always use this term as nothing about us without us. You know, if you want to know how to make your bar more trans inclusive, talk to me, talk to another trans person. If you want to figure out, you know, are there issues with racism in my club, talk to a black or brown person or an Asian person. If you want to, you know, if you want to make things more accessible, you speak to the people that are experiencing that. You know, we hate nothing more than people making decisions about us when they know nothing about us at all. So yeah, and I don't think it just falls into clubs. I think it falls into our healthcare system too. You know, and I think when we come out of this pandemic, one thing that's really struck me, you know, trans healthcare is as it is, and we're going to keep working on that. But one thing that really struck me is just how on our knees our sexual health services are. You know, they essentially all closed at one point during the year. Some are not fully reopened. Some aren't opened at all. And we're going to see a huge demand on them, you know, when places are back to capacity. Because, you know, just because sexual health services close, just because there is a pandemic, I can absolutely guarantee everybody that sex did not stop. And sexual health is essential.
In fact, I believe the HSE just announced tonight that there's a syphilis outbreak in Dublin. So
people on the activism, you know, scene for sexual health have known there's been a syphilis outbreak for months now, actually almost a year. And you know, why the HSE only figuring this out now? Because they're starting to slowly open their services now. But this outbreak has been happening for months.
Yeah, this is it. I saw a really nice comment there to head back to what you were all saying, which is diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. I think that's a nice way. Pradeep, do you have anything else to add about kind of making spaces more accessible and inclusive?
I think we don't need any rocket science. I just believe and strongly feel, and when I go to the place like Grace, I just feel like we just need to recognize that these places for the different people, the queer community is so colorful, it's so fun, and we need to embrace that vibrance. If you go to the club, when I go to the club, I do one thing. I just go and smile with everyone or try to talk with them and say hello. And if somebody alone, I just go and talk with them. Hi, hello. How are you doing? How to react with me is their chance, is their choice. I can't change. He might be don't like, oh, this Asian, and he's saying hello. And that thing mostly backfire on me. And I keep doing, because I believe when I was alone and I wanted to be talk with someone, I need to be seen by people. There may be a lot of other people in my state of mind. So just go there, talk with people, say hello, how are you? It doesn't take much. Or you don't have to date with them or sleep with them, just saying hello.
But you should if you can.
Yeah, you can. You should.
Yeah.
But I think, so that's thing. And we need to do this more. If you have staff, you can show the staff is diverse, just like as Grace. They're like, the staff is so diverse, not all six packs. So you are so what you're showing, you're cutting short all possibility, just showing this six-pack stuff there. That no, so we just embrace only one side of attractiveness, and that attractiveness is many people it affecting everyday life, their self-esteem, their depression issues, a lot of things. So we can change this.
Yeah, we need to get over attractiveness really as a concept, I think. You know, it's so boring at this stage.
I agree.
You know.
So last year.
You know,
2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, you're fine. You know, it's fine. There's so much emphasis in our community about how things look and how people look, and it's really holding us back, I think.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think, our community come in all shapes, all sizes, all colors, all personalities, and we are all beautiful, funny, smart, sexy people. And the answer is that we just need more of us and to be kinder to each other.
Absolutely.
Which actually leads very nicely, because we've 5 minutes left now. So I suppose just give you a minute each. We might go Noah, Pradeep, and then Veda, just to kind of give a minute each, basically. If you have, I suppose, on the theme of reflection on what we're talking about, if you have kind of like a closing message that you want to get out there. I know we've covered some of it already, but the floor is yours, Mr. Halpin.
I guess I just kind of want to reflect a little bit on, the past kind of year and a bit that we've had. And I think it's really important to note that, essentially we were all ripped away from our community, our family, our home, because of this pandemic. And it's really important to acknowledge that, I personally, and I know a lot of others, have found that really difficult, not being able to be with each other physically and to see each other like we normally would, and to acknowledge that there are people that might have been stuck in homes, maybe family homes, where they can't be out and they can't be their true self, and they might be stuck in abusive situations and things like that. And coming out of this, I think we need to be aware of that, be kind to each other, and we need to build our community back up, but better.
Brilliant. Pradeep?
Yeah, so same to what just Noah said, we need to be nice to each other. We need to be, and I would like to add more into that. We need to have this open heart and open ears. It doesn't take much to be attentive and nice. And especially for people, immigrant people, it is a huge loss of all the culture, all that, everything has been ripped off from them in this year. There is a lot of uncertainty on immigration system, uncertainty of visa status, so they are going through a lot. They don't show. Unfortunately, they don't have friends here, and so you can be friends with them. You can solve their problem overnight, but you can be nice to them. Be nice, because again, I'm saying it's not only about sex. The communities need to understand this. It's not only about Grindr and sex and everything. There is a lot more thing to the queerness. It is attached. And as an artist and as a writer and speaker, I just feel that this is a good space for us to reflect and work on this all learnings that we have done with this loneliness of pandemic.
Thank you, Pradeep. And last but not least, Veda.
Well, I'm just going to say, because we've only got a couple of minutes left, how great it was to talk to you all. And it was very interesting and just kind of nice to catch up. And what I want to say that I got most out of this is a reminder of how lonely it can be being a single person out there on the scene, and how easy it would be for us to make each other feel less lonely just by being kinder, more conscious, nicer, more inclusive. So that's what I've learned this evening. I hope everybody at home has learned the same thing. Thanks, folks.
Thank you very much. So now I'm just going to wrap up. So I'd like to thank, of course, Noah, Veda, and Pradeep for your time. I think, well, I don't know.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I think if you can see the comments, people seem to be absolutely loving it. So for more of what we're up to for our festival, check our website, donate to our community fund, come to the Pride Hub on Duke Street, buy a U=U t-shirt, buy a TENI tote bag, and we'll see you all real soon. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye. Bye.